Software always breaks. What are the best ways of dealing with errors in your app? One time I had to diagnose and fix a data race in a real-time telephony application. There was nothing the user could do, and when the problem occurred, it brought down an entire node. In that case, having fine-grained and detailed logs was the most important thing to reason about the cause, fix it, and ultimately tell whether the problem was gone. I think that if I had to sum up the problem, it's that software is put together by fallible individuals out of complicated parts that don't always have predictable behaviour. In fact, when you're developing software, you won't get it right the first time. That means that it's certain that you'll have to deal with errors at some stage, usually sooner rather than later. Here are 8 strategies that you can use to handle errors in your application. Report the error. This is most useful in situations where there's something that the user can do in response to the error message. You can report the error to the user and give them concrete steps or advice about how to solve the problem themselves. If there's no actionable step for the user, you can report it to the ops team or to the software team. Suppress, log, or ignore. Suppressing, logging, or ignoring errors is useful in situations where nobody can help or nothing serious happens. Sometimes it's easy to detect a common error condition that gets in the way, or that you know a solution is on the way, but the noise of the error can flood out your ops team's ability to deal with the more serious errors. Cut in a bit of a code to detect the situation and suppress it, or perhaps log it so you can see when it's happened. Don't pretend like you haven't done this. Listen, a log file is a great place to put an error that you have no interest in fixing right now. Logging is best used in combination with other error handling mechanisms because of its ultra-weak ability to motivate a resolution. Obviously, catching or ignoring errors is worse, but there may be genuine situations where you just don't care about an error having occurred, and in that case, ignoring those is good. Partial success, otherwise known as partial failure. Maybe part of your process succeeds and the rest fails. This is a particularly useful mechanism in the case that you have a third party involved in a transaction. Perhaps the user has successfully ordered a product, but the payment gateway times out. Probably there's something else that you can do there, but perhaps there are still other important things that you can set in action. This is best resolved with one or more of the next few strategies. Retry or wait. I think that this is the default way to deal with a lot of errors. It's a pretty good solution for unattended systems, but in some cases you have an end user waiting for a response, and in those cases you'll want to use one of the other mechanisms that don't keep them waiting. One thing to keep in mind is that retries do something to distributed transactions that you might not have expected. Your messages or requests will arrive out of order. If you haven't already learned about idempotence, now's the time. Idempotent Message. Allow a message to be processed twice without causing duplication or errors. This essentially means keeping track somehow of messages or requests you've already processed. One special case that my team and I have been using is a timestamp, which is helpful when you're keeping track of a replica copy of a record or an object. You can compare the timestamp against one that's stored and ignore late messages. This doesn't work for all message types though. In some cases you'll perhaps need to do a bit of time travel and reevaluate the order of the events. Rollback or compensate. In some systems you can keep your transaction partially committed and simply roll them back without any extra side effects. In distributed systems, this typically requires some kind of multi-phase coordination algorithm that commits only when all of the parts agree that the operation will be successful. In other systems, it may be necessary to compensate more directly by processing a specific rollback step when failures have occurred. Ideally, you wouldn't try to roll back something that you don't control, like sending an email to an end user. Store and report. If you've never worked on a system where the requests, responses, and errors are available to view and reason about, I'd love to recommend you find a way of putting this into your application. There are drawbacks though. Fine-grained logging of requests, responses, and errors can create a large amount of metadata and slow down requests. Panic or fail. For some systems, it's appropriate to have an all-or-nothing approach to dealing with errors. If the system discovers that it's in an inconsistent state, it can refuse to continue. This is good where a person is able to interact with it immediately and recover it, but not so good for a fighter plane, satellite, or Mars probe. And if this was helpful, please let me know in the comments.